I heard on the news that there was a killer out there who was targeting people who aren't appreciated in life.
I would just go out and like skip in the sun, you know? But I would just wake up and shout, "Oh my God, yay, another day."
Hello, Ghoul Scouts. Would you like to play a game? You've lived your lives enjoying the Saw franchise, and we're here to tell you it's actually really terrible, and what are you doing?
I don't want to play a game. But also I agree with you. Because one, I'm in this trap. But then also, I'm a baby and I hate gore.
And we're the Ghouls next door. Talk about spooky stuff.
That's what you've been known to do.
Yes, and we are starting a new series this month, spooky month of October, our favorite time of the year. And we're talking about a director and then inadvertently a writer who has impacted the horror genre with many film franchises, not just films, right? Because like we have like directors who've done amazing work and have been making films for a long time, right? And they exist outside of it. So like you have Jordan Peele, each one of his films is independent of the other. Even in Carpenter, Romero does sometimes dabble back into his zombie worlds, but for the most part, it's kind of like we made it, we go, unless it's Evil Dead.
Yeah, we did it, now we're done, yeah.
This man has accomplished 3 different franchises and rumored to be starting another one.
Yeah.
The endurance, and mostly are very different. And I think there's also something to be said about the fact that like they introduce these ideas. They make something really quite interesting that crashes its way onto the scene of horror, and then he passes the torch. He hands it over to somebody else. Sometimes Lee Wanell is still involved, but for the most part, James, dabbles in it for a little bit, and then he gets a new project, and he's excited to do that. So we have dubbed the month of October Wantober, as we will be covering strictly James Wan programs. So kicking off with her son, the Saw series, which was vaguely covered on the Ghouls in an earlier episode. It was a guest episode because Kat tapped out.
Yeah, and honestly, in watching all 9 of these films, I didn't. Gabe did, because I am a baby, and I watched most of them, and then I read about the other ones, and it's just because I'm a baby. I really can't deal with the gore. It's just so much, and then also like because of the tism, I like get super empathy from like just hearing the people scream. It's like real. So I'm just like, I can't emotionally deal with this. So I was gonna not, for my safety.
So when we covered it, it was to talk about torture porn as like the subgenre of horror, which I would say like it saw definitely didn't start, because you have things like high tension and martyrs, right? Like it's definitely existed in different ways in the horror genre. I think Saw, similarly to the Paranormal Activity franchise, kind of jump started it or heightened it, and then we have Hostel and just Eli Roth at any time, and I think like for me growing up, I enjoyed the challenge of torture porn, of watching it, and it was something I was able to very easily like, this is not real, these aren't real people. And I was able to just like enjoy certain aspects of it. I have seen like most of the Hostel films. I loved Cabin Fever, and I loved some of the interviews with Eli Roth and how giddy he would get if when the audiences were watching that scene in Cabin in or it's not Cabin in the Woods, what is it? Cabin Fever, when she's shaving. And I was like, and how this like the audience is like cringing and freaking out, and he's just like, yes, I did it. Yeah, and for me as someone who was like growing up and wanting to do horror at some point, as a director, I was like, that's really fun. Like that's a fun, like to see your work have an impact in that way. I will say though, in the many years since I last watched a Saw film, because I'm way out of date, I think I stopped at like 4, and I just like stopped paying attention, and like I knew they kept making films, but it didn't really click. I just kind of like, I was like, yeah. Yeah, like I didn't know that the storyline was as sloppy or like as deep as it went, and like I'd heard rumors of some of the traps and was like, oh yeah, that's cool. One day I'll get around to it. And in rewatching them, I have grown to be a bit more sensitive to them. And yeah, it could be with age. I'm a little more aware of my mortality. Maybe I'm far more caring about people. And then also having my media analysis classes on, I was like, even the message, quote unquote, that he's trying to give you is really not enough to make me feel good about what's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah, we were texting about that the other day, where it was like, for whatever reason, just in watching all of the gore that we have, and like I think it is like a growing as people kind of thing. I don't know. We're like, we just like have developed a lot more like media analysis views for things, and like the empathy that comes with like really humanizing all the characters that you're seeing on screen and like what they mean makes it harder to watch that kind of stuff. It's like, it was when I was younger, like I was like, what a fun, wacky time of murder time. You know, I remember watching the Saw movies and like really not being super impacted by them, just being like, oh, that's so fun. I don't mind gore. I love horror movies. La da da. I love life. I'm never gonna die. You know, I'm young. And yeah, I think it's like a combination of all those things. I don't want to say like if you're. I feel weird saying growth, because it's like it can't just be entirely that, because there's people who like are fully growth humans, you know, and love gore. So I don't know if it's necessarily that, but I think our media analysis angle to it, and like just feeling like
and
the people who are watching are people.
So firstly, I do want to say that as ridiculous as they are fun. There are elements to it that are genuinely fun. And I think if you are someone like myself who are intrigued by the traps, I think that's why the plot suffers so often and gets really silly, is because the target is the traps. Like, let's see what crazy thing we can do with the bodies. And also like bastardizing and twisting the original, again, quote unquote, message of Jigsaw is also a part of that, right? Both confronting the flaws in the original narrative, but also how it, because it's so flimsy, because it's not a very good argument, it's so easily distorted and remade into a different image by the many proteges that he has. So and every single time such a twist, and you're like, what, how did we get here? And then they're like, let me show you every single image of how we got here, so now you know for sure. So I was just talking to our good friend Jeff, and we were talking about how you know, Saw is one of those horror films that not a lot of people can get into, and we will often say like, most people should give certain horror films a shot, like, you know, and some of them are safe to try out. So for example, like the Final Destination franchise, the deaths are so goofy.
Yeah, they're very silly.
You don't feel like this is really happening. And so you can really just like get into make-believe worlds and not feel the right stress.
That's what it is, because in like, I don't mind it in like other movies where it's like, just seems so fantastical. Like that would never happen, but serial killers absolutely exist. So I think maybe that's what it is about the Saw movies specifically, that like, I just can't get through, because it's like people doing that to other people. And that's scary. If it's like a monster of death that like is supernaturally messing with people, sure. That's silly and fun. But if it's just some guy who decided for whatever reason you needed this experience.
You're not living life enough.
Yeah, like what? And that's just like so scary. And like also just like looking, I'm like, did I ever do anything that would make John Kramer come for me? Isn't that his name?
Probably, yeah, that's his name.
So yeah, you know, it's just like, it's extra scary because it's like a very human element to it where like a person could do those things.
Yeah.
Like a Saw copycat could exist in real life. He makes those things with metal.
Yeah.
You know?
And later with lasers.
Just parts.
Yeah. I think the other part of that is graphically, right? It is very true to the human body. Like, it's absurd things happening to the human body, but it's not a far-fetched. Like, when we see people getting smushed by panes of glass in Final Destination or sliced through in that way, it still seems kind of silly. It's still giving, you know, 13 Ghosts, right? It's still giving camp in a way that Saw is not doing. Saw is like, no, scientifically, what would happen if you injected a human body with a bunch of acid from the inside and then they just they just cooked from the inside out? Like, what would happen? And then they do that and you're like, oh, okay, that's what would happen, I guess.
It just feels so believable, like that could happen to a person if in this scenario, and that's what makes it really scary for me.
And I think that's a big thing. So I would say, you know, there are films and topics that we cover where we're like, you know what, go ahead and you can do it. We're giving you the okay. This is one where we say you can absolutely instead listen to this episode and never watch a Saw film. That's okay. I will tell you everything you need to know. You won't miss a thing because I watched all 9 films. I did it. I'm miserable, but I did it. 9.5. Yeah. I watched all of them, and maybe I'll watch the 10th one, generally because I am curious of what they do. And that comes out later this month, so we'll see how it goes. I watch them all, and there are some overall themes, there are some overall ideas that I'm not super cool with. And then there's like the traps that really stick with me where, so my intention for this episode is I have no idea where it's going to go. So I absolutely apologize to anyone who sees the runtime and it's very long because I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. Yeah. But we're going to talk.
It's a lot of films to get through. It's not like the other ones where it was like 5 or like 3. Yeah. This is like almost 10 whole movies.
It's so much. And there's a lot happening. I will say it might be a little easier because some of them the storyline is literally just one story. It's nothing new. So that's kind of interesting as far as a franchise to go this long and it be like within months of each other. Until the last one. So I think that's kind of fun. But yeah, I intend to kind of go over some themes, some issues that I have with John's twisted logic, and just, you know, he could have went about this the other way. I'll also go over all the films, give you a little blurb about what happens in each one of them. I'm gonna not do every single bit of it, but give you the gist of like what is occurring in those films, and then maybe some of the parts that stuck with me. And then we'll also talk about some of our favorite traps and whether those are the ones that hurt us the most emotionally and physically and made us go, ow. Like there were parts of my body that genuinely hurt. Like they ached after watching, that I was like, okay, you did it. You did accomplished.
You're right. I would not want to die that way. Yeah, you got me, Saw film. A new fear unlocked. I didn't know that was a fear for me because in what world would I be in this situation with these traps? But now I am scared.
Yeah, I'm saying like true. People who are aware of the Jigsaw, like serial killer, and they wake up in the trap, right? I'd be like, dang, if I heard on the news that there was a killer out there who is targeting people who aren't appreciated in life.
I would just go out and like skip in the sun, you know?
And I know that means he wins.
I would just wake up and shout, oh my God, yay, another day. Sun salutations, but
I can't wait for another one.
Just really
bring it on.
Make sure he knows. He spies on them for like
just
weeks.
like the biggest
so like
smile.
I'm gonna make it real apparent that I'm just digging life.
Yeah, like I am gonna, and it sucks because that means he wins, right? You're creating the world. That's what I want to see. I want to see someone who's like, there's an epidemic of people who are fake happy because there's a Jigsaw character out here, and everyone's just like, oh wow, what a wonderful day! It's so good to see you. None of us are cheating on our husbands and wives. No, like nobody's doing anything wrong. But he's against antidepressants. You just have to be naturally happy.
Yeah.
That's
oh my God.
Again, so like
ridiculous. Yeah.
So my favorite thing is
so much
that John Kramer, and I don't remember the man's name, and I apologize to the internet who I know love him. Breaking Bad man. With a hat. I'm the one who knocks. You know what I'm talking about. Both of them got a cancer diagnosis and were like, wow, life is really unfair. The system is unfair. This is awful. What particular set of skills do I have that can fix this problem or address the problem? And their answer wasn't like, let me dismantle the systems of oppression. Let me go after, like, until later. He does kind of get there maybe a little bit, and he misses the mark still. But both of them were like, no, instead we're going to prey on vulnerable people who are also hurting. Like, what are, like, and they really play off John to be, like, as the series develops, they do play off John to be like a lifetime hero, right? He works, he, is like an architect, and he's building housing for lower income folks and people who are vulnerable in that way, and specifically in times of like that being stressed, and he's going out of his way, and like even with the caution that he has towards his wife's job, like he still is very adamant about like people getting saved in some way. And so he does that his whole life. And for me, I'm just like, that is a serial killer kind of thing sometimes. So it's like, you could be both, right? You could care about people and then something happens and now you've jumped it. You've jumped the shark of life. And here we are.
Yeah. I guess it's just like also considering like his perspective as a white man. Was just like, of course, this is the solution. It's not the people above that are the problem. It's going to be the poor people do it to themselves.
Yeah. Yes.
Drug addicts, it's a choice.
Yes.
Everything's a choice. Everyone chooses to be broke. Everyone chooses that. That's not a systemic issue. Yeah. That's an individual person issue, according to him.
It's like, and at one point he has a whole trap where he literally spells it out. He spells out, you were born like with power. You were born white, wealthy, in this, like you were given all the advantages of life. And then he completely ruins it. And I will get to that because I think it's so, like, I audibly, like I was laughing out loud, literally, because I was like, how you were so close. And so I feel like that happens so often with him because he's essentially the horror version of that really terrible country song that was top of the charts, and all the Republicans were playing it, completely missing the mark. The Richmond, north of Richmond, where it was so close. Okay. It's very close to the point where he's like, they have all the money, they have all the power, the Richmond, north of Richmond, and we're suffering. Like no one's taking care of us, the poor folk, right? Yeah. And then he has this line where he takes a dig at people who are bigger and who eat snacks using their welfare benefits. Yeah. And I was like, what is this detour we're taking to continue? Like, what are they doing that you seem to think is exactly the same as the rich people in Richmond who are actively harming everyone? this little pit stop you've totally undermined what you're saying. And I get, like, I know where he's coming from because I know people who are like that. And the problem is they don't understand that they're running in exactly to the narratives that keep us separated, right? The us versus them, like narratives that we have that keep us separated so that we cannot come together and make a difference. Right? And so that's exactly what Jigsaw is, where he's like so close to like, this is an issue, right? This is a problem. And then specifically targeting vulnerable people, right? So he's he's targeting sick people, he's targeting grieving people. Like, the offenses of the folks are like people who are users, right? And drug addiction is an illness, right? And also a product of their environment and circumstances. Like, he equates that if we're following, like, it's not John Kramer, but the Jigsaw rhetoric is equating drug users to Nazis at some point. Like, because Christ. That's one of the people in the traps, the only one where I was like, yep, this one's a good one. You did it. Good job. So close. Other people are there, people who are grieving, literally grieving. Yeah. He has people who stole pocket change and freaked out because of that panic and ended up resulting in someone losing their life. He has someone who's taking pictures of another person who was doing bad things, and somehow he's in the trap. No one can convince me why that man is in the trap in the first one.
There's so much just like skewed logic, and as you said, just like very close to the point, not quite there, and just like victimizing the wrong people. And what's wild is when you showed me a YouTube video, it was going through like the whole plot. And one of the things that they said is that because John, in one of the films, I don't know, but he ends up attempting to end his own life. And then when he lives from that experience, that is what made him think that you have to live through almost die to want to live. And it's like, actually, that's not how that works. You're just giving people complex trauma that is not going to make their lives easier or make them feel happier about existing. Like, you had one very specific experience that is not going to apply to literally every other human that exists. People handle trauma entirely different. Like, the science of trauma is that like you can experience all the same things and have an entirely different way of processing that with your brain and your like chemicals in your brain and your emotional processing. Like, trauma is not the same for everybody. So you saying, oh, I fell off a bridge or like a cliff, I'm going to make everyone have that kind of experience and we'll all come out wanting to be here, is just so stupid. And it's true to him, I guess. It's
and I'd say especially like all his proteges reveal that that's not the case. Because every one of them comes out like, oh, I am thankful for life, and then hurt people. They don't do it for whatever quote unquote good he thinks he's doing it. And he knows that. Like, he's not a fool in that. He knows that, and he sets them up too. And I think that's silly. Like, why'd you give him so much power? You don't have to keep doing traps. Just have a conversation, bud. Just talk to people.
Yeah. And if anything, like, all those experiences could show him, like, hey, not everyone's going to take the same thing out of this experience. The people who have survived had a totally different scenario than you, an emotional impact on their lives than you. So, like, why do you keep thinking this is going to work?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of levels to that. It's also like, life is not a walk in the park, right? You need to let people live the way that they're going to live. And it's not until he really is targeting the people who are a part of the system or actively harming people that becomes more important. So I think like there are victims in his traps that are deserving of some type of justice. I wouldn't say that they deserve to be put into traps, but there is justice that should be done for those people. So for example, the cops, although the ones that he goes after, like in the second one, he was planting evidence, and later there's ones that do false testimonies. There's ones that just don't answer calls. And it's essentially like these cops aren't doing the job, which is to protect and serve. They're doing neither. So here they are in a trap, right? Absolutely. Like, I get, like, justice needs to happen to them. The insurance company folks, the real estate folks, are the people who, like, were the result of 5 people dying in an apartment building because of they wanted money, for sure. The Nazis, for sure, deserved it. Was like, that's the one where I was like, it's okay if this trap is rigged to not win. I was like, this is literally the only one where I'm like, it's okay if this one doesn't work. That's okay. Yeah. This one, you could put him in the butt. You could put him in the angel trap. You could put him in there. You could put him in the swinging, the pendulum thing. You could put him in that. You could put him in the little mouth thing. All the ones that don't work, the ones who were specifically never allowed to survive, absolutely, you could put them in there. But the way they died was fun anyway. So, but I just think there are better targets than the ones that he chooses. And sometimes they're sprinkled in there. There is like an abuser, like a child abuser and wife abuser who's in a trap, but he puts the wife in the trap too because she didn't speak out. So he's ignorant of the fact that that's a very complicated situation.
Yeah.
Like no, like, and that also gets confronted later. There's a girl, like a woman who survived. There's like a survivors group, and one of the women survives and explains like it was her versus like her husband, and she realized that he had been harming her whole life. So she, like, you know, it's kind of us versus them. She killed him, and this other survivor is like, it took that for you to leave. Like, there really was just like, you cannot be thanking him for that. There are other ways that you could have been doing that. And then like, also you could, you know, go after other serial killers. And I guess he kind of does, in the fact that he goes after his own proteges. I guess in this world, there aren't really other serial killers. They're not as prolific as John Kramer, to that extent. Yeah. So he could have been Dexter, though, you know?
At least not in this, like, locale. I guess it's limited to where they live.
And especially because it's like a year. This stuff is happening. The other thing is, it's super ableist for a number of reasons. Like, the traps themselves are super ableist. There's this YouTuber, and he is differently abled, and he'll do like rating like horror villains and if they're ableist or not. And he like totally digs into Jigsaw. Let's see if I can find it. But he like labels all of them, and some of them are really funny. And some of them are surprising, where he's like, you know what, this person would be an ally. This one, not so much. But I think one of the biggest messages is like, so often the message is like, you have to like suffer some bodily harm that will change the way that you function in the world, but not so much that you don't function in the world. And that's horrifying. Oh, you won't have a leg. Yeah. You won't have an arm. You hurt your hands. You can't see. Like, all of these things. And it's like, people already live that way. And that happens to people all the time. Like, people live and they're not differently abled, and then one day they are. And it is not the end of the world. Like, so that threat is really gross to begin with. And again, it's also like the mental illness factor to a lot of the people who end up in his traps. He's definitely just not understanding of brain chemicals as much as he knows how the physiology works and what happens if you twist an arm a certain way or whatever. He doesn't know that sometimes our brain doesn't make the right chemicals.
Yeah, like some people don't have as much dopamine, so they need antidepressants, man. Like, and you don't have to murder them for that, or like put them in this awful contraption and like make them feel horrible about the fact that like, they feel sadness. Like, what? It's absolutely absurd. He's rude. That's how I feel. But that he's a murderer, so
he's not supposed to be good. And I think that's a big thing.
He wasn't supposed to be a good guy.
I will say that there is, like, I do like that they're kind of poking fun in later in the Saw 8. The one before Spiral, Saw 8, I'm pretty sure. They kind of poke fun because somebody in there is a big Jigsaw fan. And it's kind of like a true crime obsession level where other people who are like, why do you like that? That's weird.
Yeah.
And I think that is a poke at the audience at that point. Because people do I think there's also a twisted understanding of John too, of him being a hero. And he's really not. And then people being like, he's technically never killed. It's like, that's incorrect. Because he threw that man in razor wire after he survived the one trap and tried to kill him. He didn't make that a trap for the person to live. He just threw him in a trap. And that happens in the beginning. That's his first trap. So he killed immediately. So you made your own story and you messed it up. So
he's a liar.
So let's start with the order of the films, and I'll try to like place them. I'll try to help. I'm going to walk everyone through. It's all, listen, for people listening and watching, okay, I just give me a little grace, okay, because I've watched all 9 films, 9.5.
Yeah, in like a really short amount of time.
And all of them are very much the same film. They're all happening at the same time, like literally days, some concurrently. Okay, they're happening at the same damn time, and sometimes you learn that film happened a long time ago, and you're like, "What are we doing?" So, give me some grace. I'm asking for it. I think I deserve it. I watched a lot of these horrible films for you. Okay, I hurt my soul for you. So let's endure together the Saw film. So let's start with Saw number 1, which kicked us all off. I will say Saw is like, the first one was one of the best films I had ever seen in the horror genre. When it came out, I was in the theater, and this is a funny story because I think about it often. And I thought about it a lot since we were doing this episode, because in the film, when we get to that ending, and it was such a big twist, I was out of my chair in the theater, because I was like, I was stuck. I was like, whoa.
Like, what do you mean?
Oh my God.
Genius.
blown away, right? And I turned, I don't even know who I was there with. It's like the movie encompassed everything that I did. But I turned to whoever I was there with, and I looked at them and I said, they can never do that again. They can never make another one of those. 9 films later, I guess they can.
That's so funny.
Gabe, what were you? I was just like, wow, that was the most amazing twist. You can't do that anymore. And I really should stop saying that, because I feel like I've done that for a few films where I was like, that was really great. That's it. It's done. Because I'm someone who's like, we told our story and that was all we needed. And then we end up with more. How do we have another orphan film? Like, I don't get it. Like, the first one was fine.
It's because we live in a capitalistic society, Gabe, that has nothing to do with talent and everything to do with how much money people have. So they like love to be like, oh my God, free market makes so much creativity. It's like, no, it stifles creativity, because then the people who have the money make all the films over and over and over again.
The same film.
And when they didn't need to, they could have stopped. They could have stopped. Paranormal Activity, the first one could have been it. This one could have been it. Honest Terminator films do we need? Not like 5, you know? We were good at 2, honestly. We didn't need a third one.
How many there are.
So it's just like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's so many films that do that. And it's because they were like, you know, you did such a good job the first time. Just do that plot. And they were like, wow, I didn't expect to get more money for this. So I did. And now we have to make all these films, and they're sloppy because we didn't think there was going to be more. And now I have to cover up all this plot. And then you just got to keep going, because they just love giving money. They're like, you did it once. You made us money, so here's more money so that you can make us more money. That's the whole thing.
Plot is a really...
That's my rant. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah. Plot is a nice word. Plot is a nice word for them and what occurs in these films. But Saw 1, it is wonderful, right? Saw 1, we get the guy from Princess Bride. I apologize again, the internet's yelling at me, because that's a cult classic and people love him. I know him personally. What I know him from is Psych. So, so that's my contribution to him, is I know him from Psych. It's all like, oh, he's gonna get out of this. He gets out of it. Okay. He's a wily fella. Is him. And he is a doctor. He's a doctor. And he Ellis. I can't ever say his last name, but it's there now. Carrie Ellis, something like that. I don't know how to say his last name. I apologize again. Internet, don't stop yelling. I can hear you. Um, so he is a doctor, and he wakes up. Well, he doesn't wake up. This other guy wakes up in a tub full of water. He was probably drowning, a question mark. But he wakes up drowning, and it's part of the plot, but he does undo the water in the thing instead of just leaving the tub. And oops, that was important.
Yeah.
That's not really a trap because he didn't have all his faculties.
Yeah.
That's a trick. That was not a trap.
Yeah.
That was a trick. Anyway, lots of flaws in Jigsaw's logic right out the gate. But he wakes up in this room. They're in this really dingy basement bathroom type space. And Dr. Carey is there. And he and the other guy are chained to parts of this room. And there's a saw, because that's the name of the film. And because the guy's name is Jigsaw. And because of puzzles. There's a lot of reasons saws are involved. And they have to piece together why they're there. They have tapes, and I think it's fun because they have to, because it exists as its own film. It's not a predecessor. It is just a film that didn't even intend to have other films. That it has a lot of really unique qualities to it that were fun, right? It's very like Hunt a Killer. Selling cat. I was like, Jill just needs to get a job like a Hunt a Killer box, bring him to an escape room. You know, just itch, scratch those itches for
give
him.
Him ideas.
No, it'd be like, what's the puzzle?
This is all I needed. Yep.
Get him a good jigsaw puzzle. They just need some more attention at home. But I think what's really great about the first one is them, you know, organically figuring out how they know each other. There's playfulness from Jigsaw of them against each other, because it's like, why would you trust this person? I don't know them, and I'm stuck in this room, right? There's like them trying to get the pieces together, find the X on the wall. The only reason they would have found it is if the lights had turned on and recharged it. And all these like different things. And then there's the added stress of like Dr. Carey's family is in danger, and he learns that in this. And then all alongside that, we're also following the cops. So we're following Danny Glover, and I'm totally blanking on the other man's name. This is where I can put my picture of me and Danny Glover again. But they're trying to figure out this because they're finding other traps that this serial killer has created. And they're finding that this person is indeed a serial killer, and his call sign is a little jigsaw piece, and he makes traps that people are supposed to come out of. So at one point, Dr. Carey, before he was in this trap, was suspected to be Jigsaw, and so we learned that someone had survived his trap, right? And so there was the reverse bear trap, which is on her face and which is on Kat's face for people who are watching. It's really good, Kat. So there's the reverse bear trap, which everyone loved, and somewhat unfortunately never get to see how it works like truly on the body, because she escapes. We learned her name is Amanda, and she got out, and she had been a drug user, and after surviving was like, you know what, life is actually great. Right?
Yeah, I love being here. So I don't need drugs ever again. I'm immediately cured 100%.
Who needs rehab?
Yeah.
It's like, you know what, instead of oh my god, I'm totally blanking. Narcan, we could just have saw traps.
Yep.
That's all. You know?
That's what they think.
So flaws in this film already with the logic of Jigsaw. And person listening, you're welcome to answer me. In Amanda's trap, she's in the head thing, and she's told she has to get her key from this person who's supposedly dead on the ground. So first of all, she's lied to, right? That's not fair. Second of all, he's not dead. He's alive. So who is that? Who is that? Why is he in this trap? Yeah. Why did he deserve to die?
Yeah.
Because he couldn't live. Like the way that they had it in there, she has to kill him to get it. So it really wasn't anything to do with her and her will to live. It was like, do you want to live so bad that you'll kill somebody else? That's not that's not what he goes for. So like self-mutilation, absolutely. Like I understand the logic for him. Ableist, but I get it, right? This one doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and he starts out like not making any sense because 100%, yeah, like that person, one, they didn't get a test. Like, why are they there in the first place? We never learned about that on the ground. They get no chance to decide that they want to be alive.
Yeah.
And then also, he hates murderers so much. He keeps saying that in like all these movies. And he made a murderer immediately. They're like, yeah, murder them. You want to live so bad. Let's really instill that in you forever.
And she's not arrested. I think that's a really big deal too. I think in any other circumstance, even the fact that she was in that trap and she would have died, she would have been on trial or something.
For manslaughter, yeah.
Involuntary for sure, but she did it. So question marks for these cops. Anyway, some of the things that we get introduced to is people saying Jigsaw never killed anybody. He did. This takes place, like, this is relatively at the beginning of Jigsaw's career. It does kick off a few things. We get, as a result of this film, we get 2, possibly 3 of his proteges. Because it tells you, it's like, oh, but actually there was someone else over there. But for sure 2 come from here. I'm a little fuzzy if the 3rd one was there. And so the whole thing for people who are unaware is that John Kramer was diagnosed with cancer, and he was diagnosed too late. His tumor was too large. And the reason it was too late was that they had done x-rays and they had gotten mislabeled by a sloppy attendant. And that person comes into play immediately. He's one of their first traps. It's kind of a spoiler for a later film. But one of his first traps involves this guy who doesn't wake up in his trap fast enough. And John immediately, so actually there are 4 proteges that come from this film. Because he eventually saves that man who had mixed up his results, because he's like, that's technically not a good read. That's just me being hateful. Right? Like, that was a mistake. He wasn't trying to hurt me.
The healthcare industry, people are overworked as heck and like are going to make mistakes. Human error exists. Like, you're working insane hours with like not enough pay, and also under like really stressful circumstances. Like, you're going to make mistakes. That's what
John thinks. He says, you know what?
Yeah,
you're right. You should live. And you know what? Instead, I see that you're actually quite troubled. You have PTSD from war. What would be really good and helpful for that trauma would be to help me make traps like the reverse bear trap. Help me make that for one of my first victims. So
perfect.
There's a little tie-in for you for the plot that's happening. So he has this lackey who comes in just to make a few of these traps, and then he's gone. He's not really here until the end of the series. We have Amanda, who has survived. Spoilers, she's one of his proteges later. And we have more spoilers. The Dr. Carey becomes a Jigsaw later too. And there's another one in there. But we haven't seen him yet, so I don't want to tell him. But this is a big deal because we have the scene where Dr. Carey does saw his leg off, because that's the name of the movie, and it's a big deal, right? It's like it was on all the posters. Everyone got a sawed off leg, and he does that, and he's trying to leave because it's revealed that Jigsaw was there the whole time. He likes to watch, and this whole time we were led to believe that Jigsaw was this other guy who was holding the doctor's wife hostage. Turns out he was also a part of it. They love a good twist. They love, like, actually, as the whole films. So when Jigsaw actually gets up, he takes off like the fake blood off his head, and then he's like, "You failed." And then he goes to close the thing. Look, I cut off his leg, and then he went to go get help, and leaves the photographer there. And it is, you're led to believe that he's going to go get help, and he says that he promises that, but he's probably going to burn. He's going to probably bleed out. Is also what you think. But neither of those things happen. Instead, he goes out, he does like solder like his wounds with a like a hot pipe that he finds.
Okay.
But while he's doing that, Amanda is going in there and suffocating the photographer so that he doesn't suffer.
Because she loves to do that.
That was like the only nice thing she did, if I'm being really honest. She could have let him go, but I think as far as like the alternative was he was just in there and he would just slowly die. It's just like that's the only credit I'll ever get Amanda. She's trash otherwise, literally. But so her trap had happened significantly before this one because she helps him set it up. And we learned that immediately later. So, and not only did Dr. Carey, like, fix his wound, but John finds him and is like, congratulations, you survived. Such a good job you did. So I'm going to give you a prosthetic and a mentorship. And you're going to help me. So, and no one's going to know until much later. Everyone's like,
it just doesn't make sense because, like, they tortured his family. Like, he was so upset. Like, that's still a thing that happened. It just doesn't make sense to me that he wouldn't have any motivation to help.
I don't see him not appreciating life. His problem was that he was sleeping with students, right? Yeah. And cheating on his wife.
Yeah.
But that didn't change.
Not being a great doctor, but that didn't change. Yeah.
He was like a mediocre doctor, but he was a good enough doctor that he could do all the surgical implants for all the traps later. So when people got a key in their eye, guess what? That was Carrie. So I refer to him as Dr. Jigsaw. So everyone knows. Okay. He's Dr. Jigsaw. Amanda's just Amanda Jigsaw. She could be Girl Jigsaw. No. Amanda Jigsaw is fine. And then, so that's the first one, and that's like the big reveal. That's really crazy. And then the second one, we have Donnie Wahlberg is a crooked cop who's been doing bad evidence things and, has informants and blah, 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 blah. And he's mean. He's a classic cop. He's angry, and he also has not a great relationship with his son. And that's so bad. So bad. Yeah. And his son gets kidnapped and is put into a house of horrors. So before we had one room, two people trying to figure it out with some like peripheral traps. This one we have a whole room, like a whole house full of traps.
Full of people, yeah.
I'm super confused, to be quite honest, about, like, so all of the traps could have been survival if they work together. But for me, it's the people he put in there. And again, having this logic. So he has people who, like, again, are users. Amanda is back. She's in it because she was harming herself. The boy is in it. He doesn't really know why. There's a girl who, what was Seventh Heaven in there for?
She did a crime. I don't remember what the crime was, but like she had also been like accused and put away by his dad.
I think it was like a drunk driving or something.
Yeah, like they had all gone to jail. Sex that was worker. Like the theme, except for him. Yeah, because
his dad put all these people away. But specifically, he put them away by framing them or planting evidence. That was the biggest thing. It wasn't so much that, like, they were doing crimes for sure, but they got caught and were put away because he planted evidence. That's a big deal. Yeah. And so I think the biggest thing is, like, we have a drug dealer, and if, like, users, victims, right? They're the vulnerable community. I don't see why they're in there. A drug dealer, absolutely. He's one of the only ones where I'm like, he should be in here. The thing is, this is where I feel like his terminology of what his, like, motives is gets a little, like, swampy, because it is like, you have to value life. You don't value your life, but it really should be, you don't value life in others' lives. Because if that man proved anything, it is that he wanted to live. He was hacking himself up. He was murdering people left and right, memorizing numbers, doesn't know what an order they go into, but he knows the numbers. Like, he's not the smartest. man, right? But he had the strongest will to live. Straight up in Amanda's face.
He was like so ready to just murder everybody like immediately. So yeah, I agree. It was like a different problem for him. They didn't belong in the same house.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah. I just think it, like when he put like for some of them, it makes a lot of sense that they're all in the same house. I do like that when the way that we learn how they're all connected. I thought that was really fun. That they all in some way were affected by this one person, and then it's like, what will happen when they find out who this kid is? I think that was fun. I think some of the traps in here were also fun. The one that haunts a lot of people is the pool of needles that Amanda gets pushed into. Especially because of the time period in which it was like made, and like AIDS and other dangerous things that weren't quite well managed would be really terrifying to have. And so it's not even like that trap was more psychological than it was physical, although it absolutely was physically painful. And for that scene, they had to painstakingly take all the needles off of them. So she's like, you know, wandering around, and then she had specific ones that were in her. But like, yeah.
There were a lot of like good traps in that, like not good as in like I would love to be there, but like good as in like, oh, that was genuinely scary. Like they burned a guy alive. The arm thing. I don't even know how you would get out of that unless you had someone helping you.
I think that's a big thing. So what Kat's referring to is there's a scene where a woman puts her hand in. It's kind of like a Chinese finger trap in that way, where you go in and you can't come back out because now the blades have come in, and so they slice her, and she tries to grab the thing. The way that could have worked is if someone, like if she took her other hand and held that open, right? But also she doesn't do that. She puts her other hand in like an idiot, and she's also all alone. So like somebody else could have, like two people could have maneuvered that. It was just kind of silly at that point. I think a lot of it too, drugging them so that they become less and less in control of their faculties was really difficult. And
also like where he get nerve gas from. I just feel like that can't be easy to come
doctor. Doctor Jigsaw. And then also, I think having Amanda, so it is revealed at the end of this one that Amanda is a Jigsaw too. Having her in the trap, in the test, made it not work anymore because she gives them all the answers. Like I know she's trying to play it in to support them, but I actually think it hindered them because now they don't even know. Like, what is the point of, like, it's like you have an escape room and you have the person who runs it in there with you. Yeah, that's cheating.
That's fair.
So that one I think is really silly. It's a little sloppy the way that they could have gotten out of it, like with a code. I think would have been like, again, a lot of it's like if people just talk to each other instead of freaking out, and you'd think he would know by now that people panic and don't think logically in times of panic, but he never learns that. And I just think it's crazy that all of this from one corrupt cop. And the biggest thing is, it's like the cop is the big bad guy, but we put all of his victims in a house and killed them. And we watched him not care so hard he didn't even know them. He
cared about the kid. He just like cared about no one else though. Absolutely.
He didn't recognize them. So I think like that was really crazy for me. And again, this is why later in Spiral, when he's like, "You never targeted cops," I was like, "This is literally the second film. And that's the whole point. Is this specific cop? The cops from the last one got hurt because they were just getting in the way, right? And this one, people are like purposely going after the cops. Like the girl gets in the angel trap, the lady cop. Yeah, and that one wasn't survivable. Nope. So. Yeah. Stress. That's all too. And it's also like, this is one of the ones where their trick is that the footage that we've been watching this whole time has already happened. And so then it gets a little sloppy because it's kind of time travel-y, where it's like, what time period is he in? And then, and then Donnie ends up in the OG trap of the room. He gets chained in the room, and it's revealed that had he listened to John and just been patient, in this time
Yeah.
of absolute terror when he thinks his son is going to get killed by a drug dealer. He, savagely beats on John, but if he had stayed, he would have found that his son is in safe. He was like, your son is safe.
And in the room.
And he was like, wink. Your son is safe, and if you're patient.
It's a pun.
He is tucked away safe. Wink, wink, wink. There's a lot of that. It's they have those scenes like almost in every single reveal where he's like, the key to your freedom. This is the key to your freedom. And you're like, that's a bullet, John. And you're like, unless there's keys in there.
Yeah.
John.
Classic that guy.
So him. So that is the big reveal, right? It's like time is silly.
Mm-hmm. If he just like didn't beat him up.
If he just wasn't like a cop.
Yeah.
If he was like a dad instead. And Donnie, the cop Donnie, I forget his name, Eric, is trapped in that beginning trap.
Yeah.
And Amanda kicks away the saw or something. Like he doesn't have a way to get out, and she doesn't suffocate him. She just closes the door and she's like, jerk, you arrested me.
Hey, Ghoul Scouts, just sneaking in here to let you know that this episode turned out to be a lot longer than we expected, and so it is now 2 episodes. So I hope you enjoyed the first 2 film reviews for the Saw franchise. It is a hefty one, so please tune in next week to see the rest of the franchise and just its toll it's had on us. And also be sure to check out Saw 9, the short film that the Ghouls have created. You can find that on our YouTube channel. Saw 9, super fun, but to get yourself pumped for your viewing pleasure of all of the Saw films. Thank you so much. Don't get married, delete your kids.